Hey guys, so I'm gonna be talking about the Nintendo Direct briefly. Um, so they mentioned a new Pokemon Mystery Dungeon remake, which I'm pretty excited for. Um, it looks pretty cool. I didn't really pay much attention to it though. I was worried about the other issue. Um, and I might discuss how the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon thing looks later, but for now, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about Pokemon Sword and Shield because obviously, by my last video, I believe that Sword and Shield at this point is a bad game. I stand by that. Sword and Shield released with nothing more than something that put most, if not all of its weight on its minimum viable product. Now, if you don't know, a minimum viable product is a game design term in which case you take all of the fluff of the game, for example, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, which coincidentally they happen to be remaking into one game, which is nice. But like these two games, their minimum viable product would be literally take any Pokemon, put it in like a dungeon, and or like put it in like a grid based thing, maybe with walls or something, and let them walk around and see if exploring that is fun. And if that's fun, great. You got your minimum viable product already all set up. Now, the minimum viable product is important because it allows you to take all that fluff and decide what is and is not fun. If a game is not fun, it's hard to figure out what about it makes it not fun if you've got all this stuff in the way of figuring it out. And Pokemon happens to have one of the best minimum viable products out there. To understand why is essentially it essentially explains why people love Sword and Shield, even though the game might not really be very good, and why people say that the game is fun, but it's not very enjoyable. Because if a game can be fun but not enjoyable, that means that the minimum viable product is doing a lot of the work. Like the basic, they kept mentioning, I saw a few reviews, and they kept mentioning the basic Pokemon experience. And you might be thinking, what is that? What is the basic Pokemon experience? And you might not be surprised to know, but there can be more than one minimum viable product for a game. Because a minimum viable product is only good if you're looking at specific mechanics. Like, think about Titanfall 2. With Titanfall 2, you have a few different ways to play. You have, or even Dead by Daylight. I'll mention that in a minute. But with Titanfall 2, you have the Titan. You have, like, calling down the Titan. And, oh, maybe that's not like a mechanic, but, like, exploiting it. That's the mechanic part of it, I guess. But you have the first person point of view from the regular pilot and the first person point of view from the Titan. And you can figure out if, like, those are two different experiences. So you need two different minimum viable products, but more. And if that doesn't make sense to you, then here's another way to describe it. If you can, I'd suggest, like, if you are not aware with Dead by Daylight, go watch one of my streams real quick on my channel. There should be a lot of them, and by a lot, I mean that's at least half of my content. But if you look, just watch the stream after this, and you'll probably get it. But if you don't know what it is, I'll try to explain it best here. There are 4 survivors and 1 killer. And the killer has to sacrifice all the survivors to this thing known as the entity before they escape. Now, you can have two different minimum viable products for this at least. And the way that makes sense is because you have two different ways you can play. You can play a survivor or as a killer. Now, the killer needs a minimum viable product. Is chasing down survivors and outsmarting them fun? Well, all you need is a survivor, a killer who moves slightly faster than the survivor, and maybe a pallet loop, or just like any loop. And if you're able to outsmart them, and you find that fun, or if you find like figuring out how to outsmart them as being fun, well, there you go. Minimum viable product for killer. Now, for survivor, if hiding from the killer and evading them is fun, and escaping is fun, minimum viable product for survivor. So you have two different minimum viable products for two different ways of playing the game. So does the core Pokemon experience have to do with more than one minimum viable product? I'd say, yeah. Because think about it, you essentially have two different ways of playing, and you're constantly switching between them. You have the walking through the tall grass thing, or like trainer battles and such, like overworld stuff, like the puzzles. It's the puzzles of Pokemon. And then you have essentially the battles. The battles, that minimum viable product is very solid. All you need to test it out. Like, if a Pokemon game isn't fun, it's probably because like the minimum viable product is messed up. Game Freak probably they didn't really put too much effort into the game, but they at least preserved the minimum viable products, which is that's actually really important, because that retains the core Pokemon experience everyone talks about. So the core Pokemon experience comprises of the two minimum viable products. You just need two Pokemon. They could be different, like one or two moves, and you need to be able to like select the moves. That's it. Like, just imagine the main Pokemon interface, but completely oversimplified, so that there's like, you're essentially removing all the fluff. So imagine taking that and gutting it until you get the things that are actually like the most important, which is moves and having the Pokemon there, I guess. I mean, you might not even need to have the Pokemon there on screen. Maybe just the health bar. And that's it. Other than that, your minimum viable product is done. Now, for the overworld stuff, is walking around exploring routes fun? Well, yeah. That's why Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is so fun. Or part of it. That's part of why people enjoy the game so much. So, to do that, all you need is like, you can even make this on Roblox if you want to, because that actually is very simple. Maybe even Unity. Actually, Roblox is simpler because like it has a lot of the stuff, but just make a guest account and like go through like this maze thing, and if that's fun, that like kind of lush maze-ish thing that's not very long, if that's fun, well, there you go. Minimum viable product 2. Done. Obviously, there's a lot more than just 2 or 3 minimum viable products that you're going to need, because there is a lot of stuff like riding your bike, using roller skates, etc., etc., etc. Surf. Yeah, the list can go on and on. But the main point here is that Pokemon is being supported by its minimum viable products, and its blatant removal of content is killing it. And this may sound like, oh, it's just a Pokemon Sword and Shield thing. Yeah, you haven't talked about the Pokemon Direct. Well, yeah, that is true, but the Pokemon Direct was essentially just, oh, hey, here we have some more Pokemon for you. 200 more Pokemon. Some of which we could have put in the game beforehand, but we didn't. Oopsie. Oh, also, here's two new areas, some more storyline, and more characters. That could have been in the main game, but we didn't feel like putting them in there. So essentially, you're paying $30 for what you should have gotten in a $60 game. I don't understand. Like, you're paying $30 to get extra content that should have shipped with a $60 game you've already bought. You need to buy the $60 game to buy the DLC. And then at that point, you're essentially throwing money at them because either way, to get the Pokemon in the DLC, you need to trade them or I heard that they'd like appear as part of an update, but I think they're just going to be put in the game's code. Either way, to get some of them, because if they put all of the Pokemon in, like the new regions, why would you buy the DLC? Or, well, I'm going to call it DLC because it's not really an expansion pack. If you're gonna buy the why would you buy the DLC if you get everything for free? Well, you wouldn't buy the DLC because you wouldn't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, because of course it's Game Freak, who decided they don't care about Pokemon much anymore, they're giving you all the stuff that you should have had in the game beforehand and just shoving it behind a paywall. Either way, you're going to need to pay for Pokemon Home to get the new Pokemon. And it's just, the DLC's a big mess. It doesn't look very exciting. They should have just put it in the game. And I can't believe that people are still defending Game Freak for this. Obviously, my stance has only been strengthened by hey, you see all this stuff? You should have put it in the game. So, I'm mainly just irritated, why would they do this, and why would they defend it? Why would people defend this? This is not something that people should be happy about. You're essentially just having content removed, and then now you're having content that should have been there being put in for money. It's kind of like you buy a car from a car dealership, and you know it's a bad car. It costs as much as a new car, but two of the tires are flat. The hood's busted. There's a few nails. There's a few nails in the door. It doesn't look very good. The paint job's kind of bad, and then you yell at people for not wanting to buy the car that obviously is messed up, even though it costs just as much as a regular car. A messed up car should either be fixed up and then sold for how much it's worth, or just be sold for what it's currently worth, almost nothing. So the game is shipping without all of its main components, and then so you're getting the car and it doesn't have everything it needs. It's obviously not running very well. So you take it back to the dealership, and the dealership's all right, I'm sorry, I sold you a broken car. The car doesn't really work very well. I knew that, but I'm gonna fix it, but it's gonna cost you half the price as the car that you just bought. You bought the car, I'm gonna have you pay half of what it was worth when you bought it. And you're okay, and you do it. And why would you do it? Because, okay, this is assuming that you're defending Game Freak or anything, but why? You're buying a car that obviously isn't worth it. It's not going to get you the mileage that you need, or at least want, because you'd want a car, unless you're on a lease, but you'd want a car that takes you that takes you pretty far. You don't just want some crappy old car that costs as much as that costs exactly the same as a brand new car. So why are people defending Pokemon when obviously it's not Like, they're not holding it up to the correct standards. And the new DLC is just proof of that, because all this stuff could have been in the game if they delayed it, which, you know, we didn't need yearly releases. I'd be fine with delays. I prefer quality over quantity. But, like, people are defending this, and I honestly don't understand it, because at the end of the day, the Pokemon Company doesn't care about you. Game Freak doesn't care about you. Game Freak doesn't care about you because they're selling you something that should have been in the game for half the price as the game. And the Pokemon Company doesn't care about you because they're a company. They kind of can't unless you work for them. So, the Direct was a total joke, except for, like, the mystery dungeon part, and probably kind of whatever else I didn't see. But, like, at least the Pokemon Sword and Shield part was a total joke. Everything there should have been in the base game. And I'm probably going to get yelled at for telling my friends this, but I don't care, because, you know, screw them. If they don't want to listen to me for saying that I don't like the game because it's not what a Pokemon game should be, then what's the point? What's the point in trying anything? What's the point? Because if you can make a game that is essentially just an overcomplicated minimum viable product, why are we still here?